Homemade pretzels with some beer cheese to dip in? Don't mind if I do. We're going to teach you how to make it on this episode of Bobby's Kitchen. Welcome back to the kitchen, guys. Glad to have you back. Today we are making a childhood favorite of mine, soft pretzels. I would say, judging by how many of these get sold at the mall, it's probably a childhood favorite of a lot of people. Really, pretzel is a pretty straightforward recipe. It's a basic bread dough. There are just some little tricks that are used to turn it from a bread into an actual pretzel, and that's more about the technique and how we go about this. I'm going to show you how it's done traditionally today, but I'm also going to give you some workarounds if you're a home cook and you want to use more familiar ingredients. But for the less familiar ingredients, I will explain them. I'll explain how to use them. I will also include links to get them. You can get them off of Amazon. They're pretty simple and they have an infinite shelf life. So you can get them and make pretzels whenever you want. But like I said, I will also give you some workarounds. We're going to start with our bread dough today. It's real basic. We've got flour, we've got some butter, salt, yeast, water. One extra ingredient I'm going to talk about in a minute, but again, I will give you a workaround for that. Now, I know some of you have a mixer at home and they make life easier, and that's great. So I will include the instructions below of how to use your mixer to do this. It's real straightforward. You don't really need me to show you the mixer method, but I am going to show you the hand knead method for those who don't have a mixer, because that's something you need more of a visual of, just to see how to do it right. So let's get right into that. Let's get started by hydrating our yeast. We have some lukewarm water here. Lukewarm is about, if you were going to measure, about 110 degrees. I always say about the temperature you would give a baby a bath in. Instant yeast is going in. I'm going to give it a quick whisk. We'll just set that aside, let it hydrate while we get our other ingredients going. I have some bread flour here. I like to use the King Arthur brand of bread flour. It has a really good structure, a really good protein content, and it's a very high quality flour. It's available at almost any grocery store. If you don't use King Arthur, make sure you use a bread flour because we want that higher protein to give us a nice chewy pretzel. And make sure you don't get anything that's been bleached. This is an unbleached flour. So to that, we're going to add a little bit of salt. And now here's our first ingredient that you may not be familiar with, this little white beigeish kind of powder. This is malt powder. It's diastatic malt powder. Now, you don't have to have this for the pretzels. I will include a link below if you want to get it, because it makes the most traditional Bavarian style pretzel. I give you a substitution below if you want to use brown sugar instead, which will give you very similar results, if not exactly the same. The reason we use this, the reason they used it in Bavaria, is because it's a beer making culture, and these pretzels were actually designed to go with beer, and they work around beer brewing ingredients. There's actually, we're going to make a beer cheese dip to go with this, which is really, really good. You'll see that later. You don't have to have it, but it's delicious if you want it. But back to the diastatic malt powder. What is it? So what is malt? Malt is something they use in brewing. It's when they take the grain, the seed from barley. Barley is a seed, and they get it a little bit damp and they let it sprout. What happens, what Mother Nature does when it sprouts, the seed will produce an enzyme. That enzyme will break down the complex carbohydrates in the seed into simple sugars that the young plant can grow off of. We're taking advantage of that as people. We sprout the seed. As soon as that enzyme is created, as soon as the sprout happens, we then toast the seed to stop the sprouting, to stop the plant from growing, and you now have a seed packed with enzymes that can break down complex carbohydrates into simple sugars that can be digested by yeast and turned into alcohol for beer making, or in our case, they're going to help break down our flour during the rise, and they're going to give you a nice brown, super dark brown, shiny pretzel with that familiar pretzel look and that familiar pretzel flavor. Now, this is not the most important ingredient to doing that. We will get to the most important ingredient later. Like I said, it's just, this is what they traditionally used, so I'm going to use it today because I'm a home brewer and I have some. I'll include a link below if you want to get it, and if not, the brown sugar substitute works very well. It'll be difficult to tell the difference. That's going in. Diastatic malt powder. Diastatic means that those enzymes are active. You can get malts that have inactive enzymes. You don't want to use that here. I'm going to give it a quick mix. Just get everything evenly combined. Now I've got my butter. I brought it out to let it get up to room temperature. Setting it aside for now. We're not adding it yet. There is a reason for that, which I will go over when we add it. But for now, I'm going to show you the tabletop method. This is how I like to do it. If you've seen any of my doughs before, you'll see that I always start on the counter. There's a reason for it. When I do it in a bowl, and you can do it in a bowl if you want, it's just harder to time the incorporation of the flour into the liquid, and I like to take my time and get it incorporated slowly so everything hydrates evenly, and that just makes it much easier for me. So with this countertop method, we get all of our dry out onto the counter. Take my bowl, I'll just make a little well. In Italian we say fare la fontana, which means make the well. When we're making pizza or pasta, we do it this way. I take my fingers and I'm just going to expand that well a little bit. I want to be able to see the countertop. Now you might be able to see if it's a little bit uneven, you have more flour over here and less. You can bring some over just to build those walls up, make it nice and even, but it's not totally necessary. Now, we've got our hydrated yeast. Give it another stir. Important to make sure none of it is stuck to the bottom, because once we pour this out, we can't add more water to rinse extra yeast off the bottom because that water hasn't been measured. We need to hydrate the right amount, so make sure there's no yeast stuck to the bottom when you pour it in. I have measured by weight here. I gave you weight measurements below. I also gave you cup measurements. If you have a scale, I highly recommend you use it. The weight measurements are way more accurate for baking. Accuracy can be really important. The cup measurements will get you close, but sometimes they can be a little off depending on how you measure it out. So if you've got a scale, you want to use it. All right, liquid is in. We can see the walls are holding everything together. It's not running on our counter. Don't have to worry about that. You take your fork and you just want to start to draw the flour into the center. A little bit at a time. Mix it around. Then you get that incorporated and you bring a little bit more in. And you don't have to worry about your walls breaking down and the water going everywhere, because as we incorporate the flour, everything will thicken up. It will start to form a thick batter. The batter doesn't want to run, and we're safe to go. You can see those walls are starting to get a little thin, but our batter is starting to get a lot of thick. So it's not running through, it's not causing problems. Just keep going. And now that batter is fully thickened. It's not going to move, it's not going to run. And this is the part where we transfer to our bench scraper to finish the process. Get a little flour on your fork and scrape off all of that wet component because you don't want to lose your hydration. It's part of the recipe. Now we got our bench scraper. We're going to start to cut the rest of this flour into the water. Just doing this kind of crosshatch pattern. Little by little, everything will start to hydrate evenly, and we'll get a nice smooth dough. Now I'm going to save my hands till the last minute because it's going to be a sticky dough and I want to keep my hands as clean as possible, so I used my scraper as much as I could. Get any excess dough off. It's all part of the recipe. Now I'm going to start to knead. I'm going to knead with my fingertips only. I'm not going to use my whole hand because I want to cut down on the surface area that's in contact with the dough. So just the fingertips. This is a sticky dough. Bread doughs should be sticky because you want them to be nice and loose so that they rise well. Hydration is really important for that. So as you can see, I'm just using fingertips and I'm rolling the dough back and forth, and then I fold it over on itself and I roll it, and I keep this process going for about 3 minutes or so. That's how long it'll take to form an even dough, and that's when we'll add our butter. All right, that's been about 3 minutes. As you can see, we now have a cohesive ball. It's not smooth yet. We're not done yet. I'll clean my hands off and we'll get this butter incorporated. So I've left my hands a little bit damp. That'll keep the dough from sticking while I give it a quick flatten. And you might still see some chunks of your malt powder. It takes that a little bit of time to dissolve. No big deal. That's fine. Room temperature butter. Now, why are we doing it this way? If you watched my cinnamon rolls recipe, you might have seen that I melted the butter and added it right at the beginning. That's because a cinnamon roll is a cakey dessert. It doesn't have to be chewy like a pretzel. Butter and fats of all kind inhibit protein development in the dough. And if you want a chewy, stretchy pretzel that you can pull out and form into a pretzel and it's got a nice bite, you want to get that protein developed before you add your fat. That's why we do the 3-minute knead first, develop the proteins. Now, room temperature butter goes on top. We're just gonna flatten it out, kinda. Now, this is gonna be a part where it gets a little messy at first. You might get scared, you might think, oh no, something's wrong. Nothing's wrong. As we knead for another 3 minutes, it'll get messy and it'll come back together and you'll have a smooth, beautiful dough. Take your scraper, fold it over, fold your dough over to enclose that butter. And I might have to show you a different technique. I was showing you that little fingertip roll kneading technique. If this gets particularly sticky, we'll switch to what's called a slap and fold, and we'll see as we go. But for now, we're just gonna start incorporating that butter, rolling everything together. Give your dough a little half turn, give it a roll. As we work the butter in, we may see some stickiness start to happen. Butter's working its way back to the surface. Starting to see a little sticky going on. And you may need to grab your scraper, just scrape it up off the counter, keep everything going. Yeah, see, we're starting to get a little bit of a messy dough now, which is perfectly normal. Nothing to be afraid of. I still haven't yet had to switch to a slap and fold, but I'll show you guys, even if I don't really need it, I'll show you guys what it is in case you do need it. So the slap and fold is when you pick your dough up, slap it down so it sticks to the counter a little, and then you fold it over itself forward like that. Pick it up again, slap it down, fold it forward. Scoop it up, slap it down, fold it forward. And you can just keep doing that. As long as your dough is really sticky, this technique will work. As it gets less sticky, it won't stick to the counter, and you won't be able to use this. You'll have to go back to a fingertip knead. But that's the idea behind the slap and fold. Now, I've reached kind of max stickiness, so I'm going to use my scraper, bring everything together, up off the counter, and I am going to switch to the slap and fold for up to the end of the knead. All right, dough is barely sticking to the counter anymore. That's how I know it's done. It's still a very sticky dough, and that's fine for the moment. That took about another 4 minutes, I would say. 3 minutes initial knead, 3 to 5 on your second knead. That was about 4 minutes. We're done there. We're just gonna cover this up. We will let it develop for another 15 minutes and we'll see how we get a beautiful smooth dough. It has been 15 minutes. Let's see what that short rest did for our dough. We won't see any rising yet. We're just gonna see how this smooths our dough out. Now it looks the same right now as it did when we put the bowl over, but watch this. Get it up off the counter. We're gonna do a little bit of a stretch and fold. Balling it up slowly, tucking everything under, giving the protein structure a good stretch, which lines up the proteins and makes everything really strong. And now we have this beautiful, smooth, shiny, resilient ball of pretzel dough. Perfect. That's all you needed was 15 minutes. Don't break your back kneading and kneading and kneading. Give it a little rest, give it a ball, and we're gonna put it, no flour needed, right onto this cutting board. You can keep it on your counter if you want. I do this so I can move it around. Bowl goes back over. We've got about a 2-hour rise time. That's how long it takes for the yeast to leaven the dough. Maybe an hour and a half if you have a warm kitchen. Just do it until it's doubled in size, and then we are gonna form our pretzels. While our dough is rising, let's move on to making our delicious Bavarian beer cheese dip. Some people call this Obatsta, that's the German word for it. It's a creamy, cheesy, super rich, little bit of paprika kind of dip. It goes so well with pretzels, as does mustard, of course, and a lot of other things. You guys can make this if you want. You don't have to go with this, but it is a great accompaniment. So I'm just gonna show you how it's done. We've got some basic ingredients here. I like to use a mixture of camembert and brie. I think that gives it a nice, creamy, pungent funk, but not overwhelming. Traditionally, they leave the rinds on for this. I don't really like to do that. I cut most of the rinds. You can probably see there's little bits of rind left on here. I cut most of the rind off because I think it gives it a smoother texture and a better flavor. But I leave little bits on to give a little bit of funk. It's up to you. You could leave all the rind on if you want. That's your call. But if you're gonna cut the rinds off, do it while the cheese is cold. This stuff is sticky and gooey, especially at room temperature. You can see how gooey. I mean, it's delicious, but that is a very sticky cheese. And at room temperature, which is what we want for making the dip, it's gonna be really hard to take the rinds off. So cut those off while it's cold, cut it up into pieces, and then let it come up to room temp along with your cream cheese and your butter. You want them all at room temperature when you're gonna make this. Now let's make a little room. And we're gonna do a quick veggie breakdown. There's only 2 things to do here. We've got some red onion and some chives. So let's just work on these. Our basic technique, I've probably shown it before, but if you haven't seen those videos, I'll show it again. You know, with your onion, we've peeled it, we've cut it in half so the flat side stays down. We left the root intact to hold the pieces together while we cut it. Flat side down, an onion is naturally made up of layers, so we don't have to cut this way. It's already cut that way by Mother Nature. We only have to cut up and down, following the basic curvature of the onion. Keep them kind of close together. We want smaller pieces in this, and then you're going to turn it. You're going to use our claw grip, so that's we hold our hand like this, and the knife can ride on our knuckles without hitting our fingers. That's how we avoid getting cut. Claw grip. Knife actually touches the knuckle, and that's what guides you on the width of your cut. Now let's do our chives. Cutting chives, you know, they kind of want to move around on you a lot, and you want to get nice, small, even pieces. So one of the tricks is to take a damp paper towel and wrap up the ends of your chives. You'll just hold everything together nicely while you cut. Sharp knife, very important when cutting chives. You don't want to mash them. You want to keep them nice and green. And then just use, again, claw grip, but we're using a rocking motion this time. So the tip of the knife is down and you're using that belly to rock, just up and down. Again, claw grip to hold and just rock. Always use a little bit of forward motion with your knife when you're using a rock chop. By forward motion, I mean the knife, as it impacts the board, should just ever so slightly slide forward, and then it comes back and slides forward. That way you're cutting all the way through your onion and you don't get that accordion cut. If you just go straight up and down, you can get that accordion on the end. It's the slight forward motion that slices all the way through. Looking very nice. We're gonna bring in a food processor. We're gonna bring this all together. Sticky funky cheese going in. It's gonna wanna stick to your hands. Do your best just to spread it around. Room temperature cream cheese, followed by room temperature butter, a little bit of salt. Now we got paprika. I'm using sweet Hungarian, that's my preference. You can use smoked if you want, that gives it a nice smoky flavor, or some spicy if you want a spicy beer cheese. But I'm gonna go with my favorite, the sweet Hungarian. Now beer, you can use any beer you want. I'm using an amber lager. It's an Oktoberfest that I brewed myself, so I thought it would be perfect. Now we haven't yet added our onion and our chives. We're gonna leave those out because we don't want them to get too blended. Let's get that top right on, give it a blend. And we are looking creamy. Beautiful texture here, exactly what we want. Creamy, silky, but still thick and dippable. Now we're gonna add in our onion and our chive. Caraway, let's see if we can get a focus on that. Those are whole caraway seeds. I like them in my dip. I like the flavor, they're good for digestion. Some people like to leave them out and that's fine. Some people like to grind them up with a mortar and pestle. So they're partially cracked, that's cool too. You can also use powder, but use half as much if you're using the powder. Let's give that a good mix. Give it a taste for salt. Tastes great, everything is balanced and beautiful like I want. Now it doesn't taste exactly how it should yet though. Technically you could serve this right now, but those onions and those chives and that caraway, they all take some time to meld into the cheeses. That cheese is thick, it takes time to absorb those flavors. So I always wrap mine up and rest it in the fridge for at least 2 hours before I serve it. We are back, guys. It has been 2 hours. Let's check on our dough. That is looking beautiful, exactly what we want. It has doubled in size. It's springy, but you can still see a little bit of an indent when I press on it. It slowly comes back. That means it's proofed properly. Let's put a little flour on our board, just a touch. We don't need a ton for this, but a little to prevent sticking. That should be fine. Get this dough off. Airy, nicely risen. I'm going to divide this into 4 equal pieces. Let's cut this in half. Now we're going to pre-shape these pieces of dough. The reason we do a pre-shape is because when you work with dough, those proteins that we've developed, they act a lot like a muscle. The more you agitate them, it's sort of like giving that muscle a Charlie horse, and they tend to tighten up. So we want to stretch this dough out into a long rope that we're going to form into pretzel shapes. So in order to get there, we're going to first form it into a tube, then we're going to rest it for 15 minutes to let those proteins relax. Let that Charlie horse loosen up, and then we'll be able to stretch it and make those big, beautiful Bavarian style soft pretzels that we all love. So I'm just going to flatten it out a little bit, degas slightly, and I'm going to take it and I'm going to roll it back on itself, just folding it over and pressing down to seal that seam. And I'm going to keep doing that. I'm making sure to I'm not rolling air into the dough. We don't want a big air bubble trapped inside because that'll turn into just like a big pocket and make it burn. We just want to force out any excess air as we're rolling it over, and then just seal off that seam. Real easy, nothing to it. We've just made the rough shape of a rope, and that is going to relax for 15 minutes. And once it's relaxed, we'll be able to stretch it out into a long, thin rope that we can make a pretzel out of. So I'm going to do that with all of these. Some might be longer than others right now just because of the way that the dough got sliced. It's not a huge deal. You don't want too much flour because you want the dough to seal on itself, and too much flour can prevent it from sticking to itself. We want that dough to stick to itself as we roll it up. And now that we have them sealed, I'm going to give it a little bit extra flour so that it won't stick to the board while it rests. All right, so we have 4 basic logs. That's perfect. A 15-minute rest is all we need. These will relax, we'll come back, and we'll make some pretzels. Make sure that while it rests, cover it with a clean towel so they don't dry out. Our rest is over. Let's check out our little loaves. Everybody is looking good. Now let's form some pretzels. A little bit of flour on the board is okay, not too much though, because when we roll these out, too much flour will make it slide around too much. So just a touch of flour. Now the basic idea is we're going to form a long rope, about 2 feet long, which is probably about the width of this cutting board. We're going to leave it wider in the middle, and we're going to taper it to the outside. That's how you get that pretzel shape. You have that nice wide belly, and then those tapered ends come together. They give you some texture, some crunch, and also when you wrap them around themselves, they don't get too thick. So I'm going to work on the ends, leaving the belly thick. Get those ends nice and thin. Don't be afraid. You know, and just take your time like I'm doing. Take your time, roll it out. That dough wants to stretch a little bit slowly, so don't force it. Almost there. You can even give it a little pull. See, we've left a nice chubby belly. It's always nice on a pretzel. Thin towards the ends. Give it a little pull. Now to shape it, you know, you'll see the guys in Bavaria are crazy. They can like swing it through the air and make it all go in one go. I'm not that much of a master pretzel-tier, whatever you want to say. So I'm just going to cross them over like that. Give them one wrap. Bring it back. You can see that pretzel shape. There it is. Press down just to seal that. And there you have it. That is a pretzel. I've prepared a pan. Just a piece of parchment paper with a little bit of cooking spray on it to keep everything from sticking. Transfer it over, keeping the shape as we go. And we've got 3 more to go. Again, we can see fat belly, thin, tapered out to the edges. Give it a little stretch. I kind of feel like the longer you get it, the cooler the pretzel looks. One twist, flip it back, form your pretzel, and there you have it. You can see, nice chubby belly. You get some thinness at the ends. When you do this wrap, it doesn't get too thick where it won't cook through, and that's what you want. Pretzel. Now I didn't do it today, but one thing you actually can do with these, exact same recipe, exact same dough, instead of forming a pretzel, you can just ball it up into a little roll, and you can make pretzel rolls that make great like burger buns or sandwich buns. You know, you just form it into a bun shape instead of a pretzel shape. Same process all the way through, pretty much the same bake time and everything. Good to go. Awesome way to make sandwiches, awesome way to serve a burger. Should I try and do one of the crazy Bavarian twists? I think I'm gonna try it. I'll probably mess it up though. Let's see. That wasn't bad. That came out. Yeah, if you get good, you can do a quick twist like that, and that makes a nice little pretzel. I'm going to cover these with plastic wrap. I'm going to leave them at room temperature for 30 minutes, and then I'm going to pop them in the fridge. 30 minutes just gives us a little bit more lift, And then the fridge time is gonna harden up that butter, harden up that dough, because we have to do a dunk on these. You're gonna see what that means, but we are gonna be dipping these into liquid before we bake them. So we want them to harden up, and that rest time in the fridge is gonna do that. So at least 4 hours in the fridge to let them get hard. But if you let them go overnight, they actually develop a little extra flavor, and I love that. More flavor is better for me, but it depends on your timeline. So at least 4 hours to let them harden up before you dip them, or overnight for maximum flavor. Make sure you cover them with plastic wrap. Welcome back, guys. I have waited overnight on my pretzels, and we're gonna talk about the most important part of making a pretzel, the thing that makes it a pretzel and not just bread. I mean, if you think about it, what have we made so far? It's basically a bread dough. And if I put it in the oven as is, it would come out like pretzel-shaped bread. Pretzels taste different than bread. They look different. They have a different texture. And the reason for that is before they're baked, they are dipped in an alkaline solution, a basic solution. That solution will cause the complex carbohydrates on the outside to break down into simpler sugars that get that really deep brown, shiny texture on the outside, and they give it that savory, minerally kind of pretzel flavor, that flavor that we just know as pretzels rather than biting into a loaf of bread. And the way that they get that done, the way it has always been done, is through the use of a strong base. Now, this is something that traditionally used to be made with wood ashes soaked in water, but now we can buy it in the store, and it is called sodium hydroxide. Get a little close up here. You may see on there, it says food grade. Food grade means it's 100% pure sodium hydroxide with no additives, which means it's not dangerous for us to use on our pretzels. Now, we don't want to eat this straight. It's a strong base, which means it would give you a chemical burn if you ate it straight. When it touches our pretzels, it will react with the pretzel, turning, like I said, those complex carbohydrates into simple sugars, but also when it reacts with the pretzel and the heat of the oven, the sodium hydroxide turns into water and carbon dioxide, which makes it totally inert, no longer harmful to you. You do have to be careful about one thing. When we first mix up this solution and the pretzels first go in, it's not inert, which means it's a strong base, and just like a strong acid, it could burn your skin. Now, it's not crazy strong. We're not making a crazy strong solution. When I say it could burn your skin, all I mean is if you got some on you and you left it there for several minutes, then you would get a small burn. If you drip a little bit on you and you rinse it off right away, no problem. Do be careful not to get it into your eyes, though. That's very important. Just like if you got vinegar in your eyes, it would burn like crazy. This would be even worse. So we're going to measure this out. It's very important to measure it accurately so we don't make it too strong. We have a liter of water to 30 grams of sodium hydroxide. That's going right in. Careful not to splash. And if you get a little bit stuck, don't use your fingers to get it out. Use a spoon or something. And you can put on gloves for this, which is always a good idea. I didn't, but I will put them on when I dip my pretzels. I'm just going to give it a stir until it fully dissolves. You can see it caked up as soon as it hit the water, but that'll dissolve. I'm using a non-reactive container. Something plastic or glass is your best bet. Don't put it in metal because a strong base can start to eat away at the metal. You don't want that. Again, it's not that crazy strong. It's not going to like dissolve your pot, but might as well use something non-reactive. Now, I know you might be thinking, where do I get sodium hydroxide? Yeah, they don't sell it at the corner store. I will include a link where you can get it online. And if you can't find any, or you're not willing to work with it or not willing to buy it, I'm also going to show you right after this a little trick to get us close to this. It won't get you the exact same kind of pretzel, but we're going to use baking soda, a little baking soda trick that will get you something similar, something pretzel-y, pretzel-ish. It won't be like a traditional pretzel exactly, which is why we're showing you both ways, but it will be something that you can use if you don't have sodium hydroxide. Okay, so that's there. That's dissolved. Now I'm going to show you something real quick, just to prove to you it's not crazy strong. Look, I touched it with my finger. I'm putting it on my hand. I'm not screaming in pain. My hand isn't going up. My skin's not melting. You can see that. I'm fine. I'm going to come to the sink, rinse it off. Give it a good rinse, and that's not a problem. I'll show you my hand later. There's not going to be any burn on it. I'll show you it now. No mark. I rinsed it off right away. If I left it there for several minutes, it would give me a small burn. That's about the level that we're talking about, but it's nothing to be terrified about. I'm going to put a lid on this for now so it doesn't splash anywhere. And we're going to move on to making our baking soda solution, showing you the alternative method, and we'll see how that works out. Our alternative method is to use some baking soda. Now, baking soda is a lot weaker of a base than is lye. So it's not going to have the exact same effect, and we are going to have to add heat to up the effect, otherwise it really won't do enough. But this is an alternative method that you can use, your household stuff that you have around to make a pretty good pretzel. I was surprised how well it came out. It's not exactly as pretzel-y as the lye, but it does work. We do want to make it strong though, so a full cup of baking soda. Pretty intense solution. We're going to bring this up to a boil, and we're going to dip our pretzel in it while it's boiling. That way the heat will help that baking soda to react to give us something similar to the lye. All right, guys, our water is boiling. We've got our oven at 425 degrees. I have pans prepared with parchment paper that's sprayed with cooking spray. Now, we did rest our pretzels on parchment sprayed, and you can use this same parchment to go into the oven. I'm using my countertop oven, which is smaller. This pan won't fit. That's why I'm transferring to smaller pans, but you can just reuse the same ones. I'm only going to do one of my 4 pretzels with this method just to show you, and I'm going to do the other 3 with the lye method, and you'll see the difference in the end. You won't be able to taste the difference, but you'll see something. All right, let's grab one of these bad boys. Now, like I said, about 20 seconds. Have something that you can use to fish it out with, because it only takes 20 seconds. You don't want to go too long, and you don't want to get your hands in there, obviously. And we're going to hold it under the water. So just making sure that all the sides are constantly coated. And you may start to see a color change in your pretzel. It'll start to look more yellow, and that is what you want. That's those carbohydrates breaking down. Very similar thing to what happens with ramen noodles. They actually use alkaline in ramen noodle dough. That's what gives them their yellow color. It makes them chewier, and it gives them a distinct ramen-y kind of flavor. So a very similar thing to pretzels, what you're doing with ramen. All right, let it drain, and then right onto your sprayed parchment. I'm going to kill the heat on this. We'll bring our lye solution in. We'll do our other 3. All right, for this part, I am going to glove up because I'm going to dip in here. You could use tongs or something, but it's just easier to use gloved hands. About 20 seconds per pretzel. Starting to see that color change. And I'm calling it. Let it drain a little bit. Right onto your pan. Pretzel number 2. Looking good. I think this one's got the best pretzel-y shape. I'm looking forward to this one. Our pretzels are dipped. You may be able to see, I don't know if you'll be able to pick it up on camera. There's the one that's baking soda versus one that's lye. This one is definitely more yellow. So you can see a little bit of a difference. Now I have here, this is pretzel salt. I'll include a link for it again if you want. Some stores carry it, some stores don't. You don't have to have pretzel salt. You can use something like a Maldon sea salt, Maldon, M-A-L-D-O-N. They do carry this at most grocery stores. It's very flaky. It holds up well on a pretzel. But I prefer the traditional pretzel salt. They make it super dense, so when it hits the wet surface of these pretzels, it doesn't dissolve, and you get that nice white chunky salt. I'm not giving a measurement on the salt. I'm gonna let you go to your taste. I find everybody has really different tastes about how much salt they want on their pretzels. I kind of go medium heavy for mine, but that's my taste. Sticks better to the pretzels that are the lye pretzels too. They're stickier. They're just more pretzel-y. Now, some people will take a sharp knife and cut the belly to help it expand. I actually don't think you need to do that. I don't think it makes a big difference, but I can give them a little bit here. We'll do a couple of them. Give it a cut. We'll see what kind of difference it is with a cut or without a cut. Okay, oven's at 425, 18 to 22 minutes until they're nice and golden brown. Here we are, guys. So exciting. I love the smell of freshly baked pretzels. It's like standing next to a pretzel stand at a fair. It just makes you feel like a little kid. And there's no treat like a pretzel when it's still warm out the oven. It's just like, it hasn't been sitting in that warmer. It's just oven fresh, ready to go. You can see on here, I'm sure you can tell which one is the outlier. This is the baking soda one. It's not as shiny. It's not as like bright brown. It's a little more of a dark brown, but it does have a very pretzel-y kind of feel to it. It's not exactly right. It's not exactly the same, but it's very good. Now you'll notice that it's more drab. It doesn't have as much shine. If you want to try to shine it up before you put it in the oven, mix 1 egg yolk with a tablespoon of water and just pastry brush that on. It'll give you a little more shine on top. I didn't want to get too much in the weeds on that. But as you can see, these are just gorgeous, perfect pretzels. Exactly what you want to see. Nice brownness, shiny, smells so pretzel-y. That pretzel salt stands out so well. Like I said, you can use Maldon if you want, but it's really nice to get the real deal and have everything be just like you would get it at a traditional pretzel stand, or if you were in Germany at a beer hall, which is really fun. You got to try that sometime. I'm going to let these cool until I can handle them a little bit more. We're going to break out that beer cheese. I think I'm going to break out some of my homemade mustard, and we'll dig in. The moment of truth has arrived, guys. I finally get to dig in. I put my pretzels in a basket, because I think that's cute. Whatever. I like things to look nice. These are some beauties. They smell great. They're still warm. We've got our obatsta here. Let's see if you guys can get a nice look of that. Come on, focus. We got some obatsta. We got my homemade semi-spicy stone ground mustard. If you're interested in that, hit me up in the comments. Tell me if you want to get that recipe too. I know I promised you guys the recipe for my homemade hot sauce. I haven't done it yet, but it is fermenting right here. It's not done fermenting yet, but when it is, I will do that recipe. So you guys will get the hot sauce. And like I said, hit me up in the comments if you want the mustard. Let's dig in and try this. Look at this guy right here. He looks like a beauty. Oh, perfect crackle. Nice tender crumb. Exactly what we're looking for. Smells like a pretzel. It's authentic. Get that beer cheese on. Let's see. Nice creamy, decadent beer cheese. Let's give it a taste. That is one of the best things on earth. That is one of my favorite dishes. That's why you guys are seeing me bust it out when we're still pretty early in this channel. It's one of those things I just had to get to. The pretzel is crunchy on the outside, tender on the inside. It's got that deep, rich, pretzel-y flavor. One of the world's perfect dishes. The beer cheese, a little bit of spice from that paprika, a little bit oniony, a little bit funky, very creamy and decadent. But guess what, guys? It's only a blue container count if you do portion fix. If you do portion fix, I am listing the containers in the comments below. You'll get the recipe for everybody. And if you do portion fix, I will list the containers down there. This does fit your plan, surprisingly enough. It is so delicious. Let's try it with a little bit of that mustard. I mean, mustard is a killer compliment to pretzels. A little bit of tangy vinegar in there. You get the little pop from the stone ground whole grain mustard. Perfect with pretzels. I wish I had a beer right now, but it's actually a Monday night. I'm not cracking into any beers. These are perfect. I feel like I'm at Oktoberfest in Munich. That's how you make homemade pretzels, the real deal. Like I said, I will include a link below to get that food grade lye you don't have to be afraid of. I showed it to you. You can also do the baking soda method, which gets you pretty close. A few steps, a little hand knead, let it rest in the fridge, and you have an out of the oven, fresh, perfect pretzel, something you almost never get, even when you go to a pretzel stand, because they just got them in the warmer. They're not taking them right out of the oven. These, you made them yourself. They're so delicious. It's gonna be the best pretzel you ever had. I hope you enjoy them. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Bobby's Kitchen.